There we go. Hello.
All right.
So let me jump in quick. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Still applies if you just jumped in. There is a reconnect button at the top of your screen. If everybody's glitching at once, the problem's on your end, not mine. If one person's glitching, we've had some issues this morning. Just slight issue. We're showing 3 or 4 bars on our server. So I'll try to keep an eye on that and keep it under control. But if everybody's glitching, it's you. Just hit that reconnect button. It'll fix. I'm going to turn it over to the moderator here and disappear. But folks, I'm here if you need me. Just holler and say, hey, Todd, kind of need something. And Craig, when you're ready for your slides, hit me up too.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mandy Malott. I am a business development specialist with the City of Columbus, working in the Economic Development Division. And I am very glad to be here to do our sector update. And we have a really great, we actually have 2 panels this morning. So 3 in this first group, and then we'll have a second 3 in our second group. And what's great this morning is we not only have real estate brokerage professionals, but we have some professionals that work in real estate adjacent areas. So you're going to get not only the brokerage perspective, but also some broader context on what's going on, especially with COVID happening right now. If anybody out in the audience has a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat and throw those questions in. So let's get started. We're going to have each of our panel members introduce themselves and give a kind of brief update on how COVID is affecting their specific sector and the realms that they work in. So why don't we start with Brian?
Yeah, Brian Marsh. I'm a managing director at JLL, where I'm in the industrial practice group. And, you know, really, I mean, COVID has been a real accelerant on e-commerce. And so the trends that were propelling e-commerce forward have just been accelerated dramatically over what would have been a 2 or 3 year period in basically, 60 days. And so the industrial business is really doing very well. And there's been a lot of disruption to supply chains, which have created business opportunities in the industrial sector. So industrial market's very strong.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's jump to Azra to introduce herself and give her COVID update.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Azra Nakachevic, and I'm a tax director with GBQ Partners. I'll be mostly providing market perspective for qualified opportunity zones, and specifically what we have been seeing in this area from the real estate development perspective. And so just as a background, my practice has been heavily focused on real estate industry taxation. And so when qualified opportunity zones were first introduced in 2018, I naturally kind of gravitated to this area and have been working with investors as well as real estate companies and helping structuring and executing qualified opportunity zone projects. And so with respect to opportunity zones, we had a really good year in 2019. And at the beginning of this year, particularly because the regulations around opportunity zones were finalized. And then at the end of 2019, some of the tax incentives were going away. So there was a lot of activity in that time period. And there's one estimate that I think said that more than $10 billion of dollars was invested in the O zones through qualified opportunity funds. However, with the start of the pandemic, what we are seeing, some projects have been put on hold, and then with the stock market plunging in March, the investment in qualified opportunity funds have dried up to a large extent at the beginning of the pandemic. And a lot of projects that were in a pipeline were having trouble bringing in capital, and on some investors also backing out of the existing projects. What we also saw is a lot of delays in getting the projects going, mostly due to the government shutdowns as a result of coronavirus. And then I think in the last 2 months, we're seeing some new projects emerge, and particularly in a commercial real estate area.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, Craig, if you'd like to.
Hi, I'm Craig Miller. I'm glad to be with you. I am the president of Duffy and Duffy Cost Segregation with offices in Columbus, Cleveland, and Detroit. And we primarily partner with developers and CPA firms who purchase, acquire, or improve or construct commercial and multifamily residential properties. And we're very busy right now, not so much with 2020 transfers of properties or new construction starts, but clients who extended their 2019 tax filing. The tax filing deadline was moved to July 15th, and then if extended, September 15th and October 15th for 2019 cost segregation requests. So it's not too late, but we're running out of time. If someone has a property that they still want to seek deductions and tax shielding for 2019, and then that free cash flow and working capital through the accelerated depreciation can certainly help with working capital and cash flow in this 2020 COVID environment.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you're a news junkie like me, you've been keeping an eye and saw that the Senate has recessed until September. So we don't know when any further COVID legislation is going to come up. So I'm going to turn to Craig to give us a brief legislative update on any new COVID legislation that we can be looking for.
Sure. I have a slide I'd like to share. Latest news on new stimulus legislation, if we can put that up. So here are some of the provisions that you may see being discussed in the coming days and weeks and may make it into the next CARES Act Part 2, including extending the payroll protection loan, which may be a forgivable grant for employers up to 500 employees. They may include a cash advance on that loan, which is currently not available. We may see some new SBA loan guarantees for employers up to 5,000 full-time equivalent employees with a $12 million loan application maximum and potentially forgivable up to the amount of dollar losses, not to exceed the loan amount. There's currently some technical glitches with the Main Street lending program as it relates to commercial real property and how they measure and determine eligibility and ratios. So they may fix that. You're going to see employee retention and creation tax credits, perhaps tax credits for cleaning and sanitizing and providing for indoor air quality. A big deal on the top right, creating a preferred equity lending facility for consolidated mortgage loans for owners who can't otherwise qualify under the SBA rules they're pretty strict. You may see some movement and a reintroduction of some national business interruption risk insurance changes. Currently, pandemics and acts of war and natural disasters, there are a lot of exclusions for property owners. You may see some movement on that. Expect to maybe see some expanded community development, financial institutions and credit union and bank lending, and maybe even a revisiting of the cancellation of debt income where that will not be taxable. There's a discussion of bringing that back on. That was available under the last Great Recession. Talks are that if that is going to be revived, that will also necessitate a reduction in basis for the amount of the cancellation of debt amount. So keep an eye on that.
And Craig, what do you think the timing, I mean, none of us have a crystal ball, especially right now. What do you think the timing might be on a large bill or moving smaller pieces?
I'd like to think, before Labor Day, but it's anyone's guess. You see the gridlock that's going on right now in Washington. But I'm optimistic maybe we'll see something before Labor Day.
And do you think that the state of Ohio, or do you know if the state of Ohio is working on any companion type legislation or any additional COVID legislation?
Well, the state already passed some legislation as it relates to grants who can reshore or restart. Any Ohio manufacturer that can manufacture or produce protective gear and equipment for the health and medical sectors. So there was that, and extension of payroll filing and withholding deadlines. There are some other legislative items pending, but the state legislature, we had a little bit of some turmoil in the news recently. So a lot of bills that were introduced are on hold, unfortunately.
All right, well, thank you. And again, reminding everybody in the audience, if you have a question, please put it into chat. So taking a broader view, right now it's a buyer's market. Oh, hold on, we've got a question for Craig that I'm going to jump into right now before we move on to something else. So Craig, do you think there will be a second round of PPP loans for small businesses?
I do expect a second round of PPP, but the discussions right now is that it is going to be limited for companies or applicants that have less than 500 employees.
Mandy, if I can just add,
absolutely.
I think a lot of real estate companies did get PPP loans. We have had some clients that for one reason or another did not get PPP funds. And so just to keep in mind for those companies, there are some benefits from the CARES Act, as well as in both of the current proposals that are out there with respect to potential deferral on payroll taxes, as well as the payroll tax credits. And that's only available for those that have not taken PPP money. And so just something to keep in mind for those that may not have taken PPP loans.
Wonderful. Thank you for adding that in. All right, so we're going to move to a broader look at the market itself. And Brian, I want to go to you first on this. I have seen a number of properties that have been on the market for a very long time, recently have some interest in them. Do you think this is a buyer's market? Do you think this will be a buyer's market that continues through 2021? What are you kind of seeing out there in terms of interest in properties?
Yeah, I think, on the industrial side, it's very stable right now. We were seeing Q1 was one of the strongest quarters for e-commerce growth. And this was growth that people had planned that would hold them into 2021, 2022. And what's really happened is all that growth plans that were taking place late last year, early this year, are just going to barely get them through this year. And so on the industrial side, there's a lot of demand. And all the markets, and particularly Columbus, have a good supply demand balance. So I don't see it really being a big buyer's market. Clearly on the smaller properties, those smaller companies that have been impacted, we're going to see some vacancies there. But again, I think across the board, the growth in e-commerce is going to offset. One thing we have seen is that there's companies out there looking for short-term leases. Commercial real estate's really set up for long-term leases, and when you've got a short-term disruption, it creates real issues with leases, the terms of those leases. And so, we're seeing a flurry of activity from 3PL companies that are trying to solve these short-term disruptions for clients. But generally speaking, the industrial side is very stable, and potentially you could see prices increasing because of the demand.
Brian, we've got a question for you. What do you think of the demand for smaller industrial properties in the 10 to 20,000 square foot space in the northwest corridor of Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, it's too soon to really know the full impact. And again, you've got generally long-term leases for all these spaces, and clearly there's companies that are being significantly impacted in certain sectors of the economy, and so it's too soon to really know what that's going to look like. A lot of landlords are talking with these smaller companies and trying to help them out to restructure something in a short period to get through it. But I think it's really going to take another couple quarters until we really know what the demand and supply looks like for that small user segment.
Excellent. And Azra, I know one of the easiest or more straightforward uses of the Opportunity Zone program is real estate purchases. Are you seeing more movement from people using that program for real estate purchases, or has that slowed down like a lot of the bigger development projects that you were speaking of earlier?
No, really, I think I said we've seen a lot of, in the last 2 months, a lot of commercial space purchases within Opportunity Zones in Central Ohio. Some are in a Refugee Road area. Some are in Whitehall. We've seen some purchases in Toledo area as well. And in general, there is really no a market for Opportunity Zones for buying and selling them because they're still in their infancy. And so one of the big qualifiers for Opportunity Zones incentives is that 10-year holding period, which is kind of preventing sales of the existing property. But there are buyers that are buying existing properties in the O zones and substantially improving them and redeveloping them. I do expect that for the rest of the year and into 2021, there should in general be some increased activity in here, mostly because at the end of 2021, one of the big benefits, which is the deferral of capital gains on the investment in Opportunity Zones, is set to expire. And so that's probably going to prompt some investors that have capital gains to put it in to get a full advantage of the benefits.
Wonderful, wonderful. Brian, we've got another question for you. Do you think that there is still an appetite and demand to lease existing vacant space?
Yeah, I would say, again, we're seeing strong demand, and while certain sectors, have been impacted dramatically in a negative manner, there's other sectors that have been, impacted positively, and so right now, we're seeing good demand. There was clearly a slowdown in activity in March and April, but then as soon as things in Ohio started to open up again, in the last 60+ days, we've seen a dramatic increase in inquiries, showings, proposals, and leases. And so, I think some of that demand that got put on hold is going to shift into Q3 and Q4. But you'll see, space to continue to be taken down.
Kind of along that same line, are there any trends that you all are seeing in client space requirements, cap rates, prices, and just kind of what the pipeline is looking like with your existing clients for this coming year? I know COVID is putting additional requirements on companies in terms of safety and space. And so I'm just wondering if you're seeing any trends in leasing that are related to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely we've seen this, sort of a wave of 3PL activity to try to solve these supply chain disruptions. And again, when you're when you've got something that's in immediate need that you're not sure how long it's going to last, it makes it difficult. And so I think that's what we're seeing, is that these 3PL requirements that are out there, and you know, landlords have looked at it and said, you know, if I can fill up my space for a year and sort of ride through this, that's a lot better than just letting it sit empty. But I really think generally, you know, cap rates have been stable. Rates, and you could argue that cap rates for industrial could actually go down because it's a safe haven for capital right now. In the money that was flowing into entertainment, hospitality, lodging, those real estate dollars are going to go somewhere, and they're more. Some of those dollars will bleed into industrial. So I could actually see cap rates dropping on the industrial sector. And as far as rental rates, so far they've held stable. You know, I do think there'll be certain sizes where you'll see some softening in rates. But I think for the larger spaces, particularly for e-commerce, you're not going to see. There's too good a demand right now, and you may see rates actually go up.
Right. We've got a question for Craig that I missed earlier. What are the chances of a tax audit after performing a cost seg study on a commercial property? Unfortunately, I'm not an accountant, so I don't know what a cost seg study is, but hopefully Craig or Azra can jump in and put some thought on a chance of a tax audit.
Good question. Each year, the accounting and tax publications rank cost segregation studies as a top tax techniques for businesses or individuals that own an income-producing property. And these studies are IRS approved, and what the IRS really wants to see is that you've had a bona fide third-party independent engineering analysis, and the audit risk is very low. I'm only aware Duffy & Duffy was founded in 2002 in Ohio. I'm only aware of 5 audits since 2002. So 18 years, 5 audits, and the examiners were happy with the study. So the risk is non-existent for the most part.
Azra, do you have anything?
Yeah, sure. I would just kind of echo what Craig has already said. We see clients do their own cost segregation studies just to save on money from hiring the experts, and that's where we sometimes will run into issues in a case of an audit, where there is not a good documentation as to how assets are qualified. So having a certified cost segregation study certainly helps, and those companies are able to support the audit process as well. I'd say that currently that cost tags are probably a low-hanging fruit that every real estate developer and company should be taking advantage of, given all the advantageous provisions in the CARES Act with respect to bonus depreciation and net operating loss carrybacks.
Continuing along that, are there other areas within the CARES Act that you think not enough businesses are taking advantage of in terms of any savings or benefits in real estate development or purchases?
Yeah, so one of the big benefits that I'm not sure that everybody is aware of is that the CARES Act provisions are not only applicable for the 2020 tax years. So with tenant improvements being able to be written off and the changes in net operating loss carrybacks, those provisions apply to 2018 and 2019 tax returns as well. So the tax returns that have already been filed and closed. And a lot of clients can take advantage of amending those tax returns and getting the refunds on the already filed tax returns. And then the biggest benefit being in case of net operating losses being carried back to prior years, which we're now able to do because of the CARES Act, there is a permanent benefit there because of the tax rate differences and tax rates being higher in a 2018 time period.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I with congressional legislation like the CARES Act, like the Opportunity Zone program, they're always so dense that it's hard for laymen or non-accountants to know that they are looking for all of the benefits possible out there. Kind of looking at opportunity zones, these benefits, real estate development in general, the industrial sector is holding steady, may even get some growth as the economy is opening up and companies figure out how to work through this. But in terms of large developments, are you guys seeing a slowdown of those projects? I know we have some projects down at Rickenbacker that are still full speed ahead in terms of large speculative industrial, but are you seeing in other sectors, and Osra, you may be the one that's seeing this the most with Opportunity Zone projects, are you seeing this in other sectors slowing down, and do you think there will be a rebound?
We have seen some slowdown in areas other than commercial developments in opportunity zones, and some projects are still full speed ahead. Some projects, larger projects that were in a pipeline, are honestly having a hard time. Investors are pretty wary now, and they're having a hard time getting to that capital stack that they need. A lot of the projects that we've seen in the last 2 months have been smaller type of projects. Most of them are just redevelopment of the existing properties that are already being there. We have not seen too many of brand new projects that have started since May.
Wonderful, thank you. Brian, we have another question for you. Do you have any updates on Rickenbacker and the Rickenbacker Logistics Park?
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of dovetails with your question earlier. The industrial segment, maybe took a 3-week pause, and then literally in late April and May, developers were closing on land. Developers were starting new construction. Transactions, capital market sales took a 30-day delay, but then those deals closed. And I mean, I was actually very surprised how quickly people got comfortable. But if you're in the industrial sector, you've put most of your chips into that e-commerce basket. And when people looked at this, they said, e-commerce has got a strong tailwind, and so we should move forward, even though we're in the midst of this crazy global pandemic. And one of the things that has come out of this is there's been a number of studies that have said that in the next 5 years in the U.S. we're going to need 1 billion square feet of industrial. And when people saw that headline, they thought, well, 1 billion square feet, that's crazy. And so I took that, divided it by 100 markets, 100 major markets over 5 years, and it's 2 million square feet per market. So if you really think of that number, it's not that big of a number, and the number makes perfect sense. And that number was already out there before COVID hit. JLL research had shown similar numbers for Columbus that were actually higher than 2 million feet a year of growth. And so when you really think about this, growth in e-commerce, it makes perfect sense. And that's why developers, are moving forward, at Rickenbacker and elsewhere.
And kind of along those same lines, as e-commerce is becoming a bigger portion of the industrial sector, what do you see for redevelopment of existing inner city spaces, such as old strip malls or something like Westland Mall? What do you see kind of in that?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, we're seeing this all over the country, and if you're delivering to the customer, you've got to be closer to the customer. And if you want to do, same day or 1 hour delivery, you've got to have a facility where near population center. And so there's this, you know, national trend of last mile, and we're seeing it in Columbus. And, you know, developers are looking at sites. The one challenge here is that our land prices sometimes make it difficult to buy something, tear it down, redevelop.
Oh, we lost you, Brian.
About 10 miles away, that's greenfield.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Are there any additional questions out in the audience that you guys feel were not covered by this half of our panel? If not, I have one more question, and this might just be a Brian question. In terms of marketing and client relations, what changes have you made, and do you see any of the innovations that you've had to put in place sticking around past the COVID?
Yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate that at JLL we've always been focused on technology, and so, you know, we really had all the tools, and we already had a lot of people working remotely. But we've been using Zoom. We've been generating virtual tours of our properties, and so we've been going down and filming our vacant spaces, so that out-of-town people can get that experience. And we've had really good response from that. Another positive of industrial is if you have a site plan and a video and an aerial and a flyover, you can get a pretty good feel for what we're going to be buying or leasing. And so I would say implementing the virtual tours, and then we've just been providing a ton of data to our clients, research data, so that they can understand what's going on in the market, and really communicating on a daily, if not hourly basis with changes in the market.
Excellent. I don't know if we have time for one more question, Todd. I've got one more. This is something we were discussing before the panel came online, is the whole new world of payroll taxes with so many people working from home. And I know, Azra, you had something that you were going to throw out before we came on. I don't know if Azra or Craig want to share anything about companies and payroll taxes.
Sure. So I can start. And when the pandemic first started and people started teleworking and being out of the office, Ohio came out with the bill that basically said for any employees that are working from home during the disaster period, they will be treated for payroll purposes as if they're working from their offices where they were working prior to COVID. And so that time has expired now. And so there is a lot of unknown here and uncertainty as to how this will be handled. We are expecting a lot of employees come 2020 tax filing season to claim a lot of refunds for taxes that were withheld for the cities where they worked in prior to COVID, given that most of them had their residences in the different cities. But I do expect, given that all the localities are looking for those tax dollars, that there's probably going to be a lot of fight, that we'll see how, well, we're yet to see how it's going to end up.
Wonderful. Well, as a city employee, I hope that doesn't become too big of a fight. That's where my paycheck comes from. But I want to thank you all so much for being on this first part of the panel, and thank everybody in the audience for these great questions. I am now going to click over to our next half of the panel, but Craig, Azra, and Brian, have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
folks, so just like we said, it's time to go back to the lobby, click on the second half of the panel. Unfortunately, we only have room for a certain number of speakers, so we had to split this in half. We'll see you in a minute at the next panel. Thank you.